Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. Cameroon is heading towards an election, and the favorite, incredibly, is Paul Biya. He's already the world's oldest head of state, and he's 92 years old. 92. Seeking an eighth term. That fact alone is just extraordinary.
It really is. And it's more than just impressive longevity, isn't it? It's this whole political phenomenon we're digging into. The sources we have give us this snapshot, a really critical one. They highlight not just the sheer scale of his power, I mean, he's been there since 1982, but also this deep, deep sense of, well, stasis, disillusionment even.
Right. And all happening against a backdrop of what? Major cost of living problems, social unrest.
Exactly, severe crises, and yet the election just seems to be rolling forward.
It really makes you wonder, how does this actually work? How does it persist? So our mission today is to try and unpack the dynamics here, figure out who Biya is, why the opposition seems unable to make a dent, structurally speaking.
And what challenges the country is facing that sort of allow this political situation, this stagnation to just continue.
Yeah. We want to give you, the listener, real insight into how power operates in this specific context. It's quite unique. So let's start with Biya himself, Paul Biya. In power since 1982.
Just think about that date. 1982.
I know. So many Cameroonians eligible to vote. There are 7.8 million of them. They literally can't remember any other president. It's almost impossible to grasp that kind of continuous rule.
And what's fascinating, kind of a key part of his style that the sources bring out, is this idea of rule by absence. I mean, despite ruling for decades, he's hardly ever seen in public.
Right. And he's, getting older. His health is reportedly declining, but he just brushes off any calls to retire.
Yeah, and spends huge amounts of time out of the country, often in Geneva, apparently.
So if the leader himself is often missing in action, how does the whole thing keep running? It suggests, I guess, that the state machinery, the party, is so entrenched it doesn't need him day to day.
That's pretty much the insight. Yeah, the bureaucracy, the ruling party, they act as this political shield. The system kind of runs itself. It's self-perpetuating.
But that low visibility must create awkward moments, right? Like needing to constantly say, he's fine.
Oh, definitely. It forces the ruling party into these moments of almost like farcical reassurance. We saw it with Grégoire Owona. He's the Labour Minister, but also the party's Secretary General. He actually had to go on French radio and insist their candidate is, quote, in great shape and totally capable of continuing.
Wow. It really says something when your main job seems to be telling people the leader is, well, alive and kicking enough to run.
It absolutely does. And linking this back to the bigger picture, this election is happening while for the average person, things feel really stagnant. You've got this cost of living crisis, serious social unrest, this general feeling the country's just drifting. So maintaining the status quo, which is basically Biya's message, it gets harder and harder to sell when people are facing these kinds of problems every day.
Okay, so given that stagnation, those crises, why hasn't some unified opposition managed to take advantage? Why is this 92-year-old incumbent, who you barely see, still the absolute favorite? Is it real popularity, or is the system sort of stacked against challengers?
Well, the sources are pretty clear that the problem runs deep. It's systemic. It's not just that the opposition fails to unify, although, yeah, that's definitely a factor.
How fractured are we talking?
Hopelessly, really. They're fielding 11 different candidates against Biya this time. 11. I mean, that kind of fragmentation just guarantees you're splitting any anti-incumbent vote into tiny pieces.
But it sounds like the system does more than just let them divide themselves. It actively blocks them.
Precisely. Opposition parties have accused the Electoral Commission, so Elections Cameroon or ElecCam again and again, of basically just doing the ruling party's bidding. And these accusations seem pretty credible. But the most dramatic example, the clearest sign of this systemic barrier, look at what happened to Maurice Kamto.
He was the main challenger last time, right? Came second in 2018.
That's the one. Probably the most credible challenger. And this time, his candidacy was simply barred by the courts, just like that.
That feels like pulling a huge lever, doesn't it? Does barring the main opponent suggest they're actually worried that maybe Biya's group isn't as strong as it looks, so they have to use the institutions? Or is this just a normal procedure there?
It's probably a bit of both. Controlling the institutions is standard operating procedure, let's say. But singling out Kamto like that, it shows they weren't willing to risk even a potentially strong challenge. It just neutralizes a major threat without Biya having to lift a finger, politically speaking, or even leave his residence.
And it's not just outsiders facing these blocks. What about those former ministers, people who were actually part of Biya's system for years now running against him?
Yeah, that's another interesting layer. You've got figures like Isachiro Mabakari and Bello Buba Magari.
Wait, wasn't he Biya's first prime minister back in 1982?
Get this? Yes, his very first PM, now running against him, openly questioning his fitness to rule, along with Chiroma.
Symbolically, that's huge.
It is. It definitely highlights some deep cracks, even within the old guard. But, observers tend to feel that while it's significant, their individual campaigns just don't have the clout, the resources or cohesion needed to really threaten by his decades-long hold on the actual state machinery. They're kind of like individuals trying to storm a fortress.
Right. And that fortress, that political stasis we're talking about, it's not happening in a vacuum. It translates directly into, well, a pretty tough daily life for millions of Cameroonians. Let's pivot to that lived reality.
Yeah, the socioeconomic situation is brutal. The sources lay it out starkly. About a third of the population lives on less than $2 a day. A third.
Wow.
Combine that with really high youth unemployment.
Yeah.
It just breeds this profound sense of political alienation.
It's especially
among young people.
You can absolutely see why young people would feel disconnected. I mean, if the economy offers nothing and politics feels totally closed off, why would you engage? Why vote for more of the same?
Exactly right. They express this deep disillusionment. And you see it in the numbers, too. Voter turnout has just plummeted over the years. It's declined dramatically.
And that's before you factor in the conflicts, right?
Yes. That decline is then massively compounded, made so much worse by two major ongoing conflicts. These make voting incredibly hard, sometimes impossible, in huge swaths of the country.
What are those main conflicts impacting stability and, well, the ability to even hold a proper election?
Well, first you've got the ongoing fight against jihadist groups up in the far north region. That keeps that whole area pretty destabilized and under a heavy security presence. But the conflict that's had the most devastating recent impact is the Anglophone separatist crisis. That really exploded back around 2017 in the western regions.
And the human cost of that Anglophone crisis, it's staggering from what the sources say.
It really is. We're talking thousands killed and over 700,000 people forced from their homes in those two English-speaking regions. When huge numbers of people are literally running for their lives, casting a ballot is, understandably, not exactly top of mind.
Which connects to figures like Kalwala, right? The party leader who's boycotting.
Exactly. Kalwala, leader of the Cameroon People's Party, she and others in her Stand Up for Cameroon movement have boycotted elections since 2018. Her argument, as the sources note, is that it's basically unconscionable to hold elections without first sorting out the security mess in the Anglophone regions.
The hashtag no-so regions, as they're often called, Northwest and Southwest.
That's right, no-so. And their perspective often is that the government's response, which has been very heavy-handed, very military-focused, has actually made things worse. They argue it fuels the marginalization, which fuels the conflict, which causes the displacement, which then leads to boycotts that damage the election's credibility. It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, this is where the story takes a really fascinating, almost personal turn. When the formal opposition is sidelined and economic hardship isn't enough to shift things, the sources point to some really unusual pressure points emerging, almost like stress tests from inside the system.
Yeah, these are challenges popping up from deep within the establishment, even, incredibly, from within the family itself. It shows that even in these very controlled systems, cracks can appear.
Like the Catholic Archbishop.
Right. Externally, you had Archbishop Samuel Kleita saying last Christmas that it just wasn't realistic for someone Biya's age to carry on. That's a big moral statement from a major institution.
And we mentioned the former ministers, Chiroma and Magari, basically saying outright, he's too old for this.
Yep. Significant betrayals from former allies. But honestly, neither of those compares to the next detail, the one involving his daughter.
Wait, his daughter, his own daughter, on TikTok, telling people not to vote for him. Is that right? That sounds absolutely wild.
It is. It's extraordinary. The sources confirm it. Brenda Biya, the president's 27-year-old daughter, apparently posted on TikTok just last month. And in the post, she reportedly said her father has made too many people suffer, and straight up told Cameroonians not to vote for him.
That is jaw-dropping, a level of public family drama you just don't expect in this kind of political environment. You can't control everything clearly if your own child is using social media against you.
It's the ultimate sign of some kind of internal breakdown, isn't it?
Sure.
Now, the post was apparently taken down later. You can imagine the pressure, but the video, the message, it's still circulating widely online among people who oppose Biya. It just goes to show, in a regime that relies so heavily on silence and loyalty, sometimes the biggest pressures come from the most unexpected personal places. It kind of shatters that whole iron fist image, brings it down to messy human reality. So, okay, 40 years in power, facing all this cynicism, 2 active conflicts, even like a viral TikTok takedown from his own daughter. How does a 92-year-old incumbent actually campaign? Well, the logistics alone are telling. Biya held exactly 1 campaign rally, just one, in Marua, up in that conflict-hit far north region.
One rally, after 4 decades. That speaks volumes, doesn't it? Either about his confidence in the system just delivering the win, or maybe just his energy levels. But what does he even promise at this point? How do you possibly sell an 8th term when the country's dealing with all this stagnation?
Well, his promises were remarkably familiar, pretty much the same things you'd pledge if you were running for the first time. He talked about stepping up security, tackling youth unemployment, improving roads and basic services, essentially running on fixing the problems he's presided over for nearly 40 years.
That requires some serious political nerve, you have to say. Did he even acknowledge the skepticism, the doubt people must feel?
He did, yeah. But he framed it through the lens of his own experience, his longevity.
Yeah.
In his speech, he said something like, and this is a quote, "I am well aware of the problems that concern you. I know the unfulfilled expectations that make you doubt the future." But then he immediately followed up, assuring the crowd that based on his vast experience, these problems are not insurmountable. Basically, trust me, I've seen it all. I can handle it.
Huh. That message. I know things are bad, but the guy who's been in charge, well, they got bad, can fix it must clash pretty hard with how younger people feel, the ones inheriting this situation.
Oh, absolutely. And we get that perspective sharply from the sources. There's this quote from Theophile, a 24-year-old artist in Douala, the main economic city. He just called the whole election a scam. He'd hoped to vote for Kamto, the opposition guy who got barred. With him out, Theophile just sounded completely hopeless about any real change happening. He said something like, as long as the system remains in place, there's nothing that can be done, that feeling, that the system itself is the roadblock. That's why so many people just don't bother voting. So what you end up seeing, what these sources really paint a picture of, is this stark, deeply uncomfortable divide. On one side, you've got this incredibly entrenched political machine. It's led by the world's oldest head of state, and it almost seems to run on autopilot, on sheer institutional inertia. And on the other side, you have this huge population, especially young people, who are struggling. They're facing serious insecurity, and they've just lost faith in the whole democratic setup.
Yeah. And what this deep dive really gives you, I think, is a clear view of how that idea of long-term stability, which is the narrative BI has pushed for decades, can slowly, almost invisibly, curdle into profound political stagnation. It leaves the country sort of trapped, doesn't it? Caught between this incredibly long history under one man and this desperate need for, well, for a different future.
Which leaves us with a really interesting question for you, the listener, to think about based on everything we've discussed. When those normal channels for democratic opposition are blocked, systematically shut down like we've seen, what's actually more potent as a form of pressure? Is it that kind of broad, passive signal of mass apathy, the cratering voter turnout showing widespread disillusionment? Or is it the sudden sharp shock of something intensely personal and internal, like a daughter's public denunciation on social media, that truly makes an entrenched iron-fisted ruler feel the pressure? Something to mull over.